these shorts by tracing out an existing piece of clothing. What you're gonna need for this project, other than your sewing machine, scissors, and thread, is about 1 yard of fabric, or whatever size would accommodate the size that you are tracing out, elastic, and a safety pin or some sort of tool that is going to help you pull the elastic through the waistband once we get to that part. The best part about this project is that I did not do a side seam on these pants, so all I had to do was one pattern piece. When you are tracing that pattern piece out, remember that you don't want to trace and draw inward where the elastic is. You want to be tracing the full fabric piece. Now, just to give you an idea of what the pattern piece looks like when it's on the body, the front is here. This is the crotch piece that goes in, and the back, which has a deeper crotch piece to accommodate for the butt, or in this case, a diaper, wraps around. Front piece, back piece, no side seam. These are the shorts that I'm using to trace. Keep in mind that when you are tracing out a pattern, if you are using a sort of stretchy fabric, you will need to add several inches to accommodate for that fabric that is usually clinging to the skin. I am using a woven, non-stretchy fabric. For this first part, I am folding it over to the back. You will notice that in the back, the crotch area is pretty long, and that is because it needs to reach all the way through the legs up to that front area of the crotch. As I trace around these shorts, I am going to leave myself about an inch, if not an inch and a half, on the sides. I want to accommodate for making these slightly bigger because my child is growing. You also want to add extra length to the bottom of the pants to accommodate for the hem. I went a little short on this hem. Next time I would go slightly longer on these ones. Because I am choosing to not have a side seam on these shorts, you will notice that I am just marking where that middle area would be. I am then going to take the shorts and fold them out to the other side so that I can trace the front part of the shorts. This way, the entire short pattern will be on one piece. If you do want to do 2 pieces of a sewing pattern, and if you want to have that side seam, you can do the same method. You will just have to, of course, add sewing that side seam together as you put the shorts together. This part is important. Once you have cut out your pattern piece, go back and make sure that that inseam portion where the pants will meet from back to front is even. You will notice here how I overshot on my front portion of the pattern, and so I am just cutting along. I just kind of eyeballed it. I made sure to stay at about that same angle, but I wanted to make sure that, again, that area where they will meet in the crotch is even. Make sure that the fabric you are using has been ironed. If you have enough fabric that you can fold it over, this is the best way to cut your fabric and make sure that you will end up with 2 mirrored pieces. you want to make sure that if you are only cutting on one panel of fabric, that you turn the pattern piece over. Otherwise, you will end up with two pattern pieces that are for one leg. So just to repeat, because it is very important, make sure you turn that pattern piece over so that you're creating two mirrored pieces if you are using fabric that has a print on only one side. Now that I have two pattern pieces cut out, one for each leg, I am going to pin each leg together at that inner crotch, that inseam area, and I will sew that down. Do this for each leg. When we're sewing along any of our seams, we want to make sure that we are giving ourselves seam allowance. Do not put the needle at the very edge of your sewing project. If you are brand new to sewing, make sure that you are using that back stitch button to lock in our stitches at the beginning and end of every seam on this project. We will be doing this after every section that we stitch. Go ahead and iron open that seam. Do not skip this step, it is very important. We will now finish the seam. If you have a separate machine called a serger, you can serge these edges. However, if you are just using your sewing machine, that is totally fine. Notice how I am doing a zigzag stitch, but I am letting that second stitch that goes to the right side slightly fall off of the fabric. This will keep my fabric from fraying. Once I have sewn together both legs at the inseam and finished the seams, I am going to turn one pant leg inside out and place the other pant leg inside of that. I am going to make sure that that seam at the top of the crotch meets up, and then I will pin that in place. I am now going to sew along that entire V shape. If you did use a zigzag stitch to finish your seams, make sure that you switch your machine back to a straight stitch for this part. It's kind of a tricky shape to sew, so make sure that you are just opening up your pieces enough that you are able to get in there and get all of those seams sewn together. Again, I'm using that same seam allowance. When I am done stitching through this, I am going to repeat those steps of ironing that seam open and finishing the seam either with a serger or a zigzag stitch. I am using a serger. inside out. This is the most exciting part because you can finally see what you've been making. Now this part is totally optional, but I would recommend it. In order to keep track of the back and the front, I do like to make sure that I have a tag. I just use a really tiny piece of fabric and I fold it in half like I'm doing here. When you are sewing a really small piece of fabric, I recommend grabbing those tail threads with your left hand and going pretty slowly. I basically just sew back and forth a few times to make sure that I will have enough fabric that is not going to come apart, so that I can identify the back piece of my shorts. Turning my shorts inside out, I am going to find the back piece of the shorts. Remember that you can look at the crotch area as a cue. The area of the crotch that is most forward is going to be the front. So actually, you can see in this video, I put the tag on the front on accident. So basically look at the crotch and do the opposite of what I'm doing here in the video. We are ready to start the stitching on the waistband. So again, you want to make sure that your shorts are turned inside out because the waistband is going to be facing down toward the inside. As you can see, I am going to regularly be checking that the elastic is going to fit into the width of the waistband that I am folding down. Do not make the mistake of sewing the waistband too narrow and not having your elastic fit, because you will have to go back and unpick it. It will be very hard to push the elastic through and it will just be very frustrating. I've made that mistake before. So take your time and regularly measure out to make sure that the elastic will fit all the way around that waistband. I am not doing any sort of specific measurements here, but I would say that I'm folding these down approximately 1.5 inches in total. I fold them over twice so that there is no raw edge of the fabric showing when I go to sew it down. Keep in mind that you are going to leave a 1 to 2 inch gap in this seam that we are about to do because you need a space to put the elastic in. I like to add an extra needle here that is perpendicular to remind me that that is where I need to stop my sewing. I've reached my perpendicular needle, so I know that it's time to stop sewing so that I'm leaving myself a gap. I'm going to back stitch and lock that stitch in place. Now I am finally ready to cut my elastic. So I am just using that original pair of shorts that I traced out to see how much elastic I need. You will double it over like I'm doing. I am giving myself a little bit of extra room because we will be overlapping the elastic when we sew it. You will want to use 2 safety pins, one on each side. I'm using a tool called a bodkin. That is a very specific sewing tool, but it's definitely not required. If you have 2 safety pins, that is good enough. You will insert the safety pin or whatever tool you're using into the gap that we left open and work the elastic through the pants. The reason that we have that second safety pin on the other side of the elastic is that if all of the elastic goes into the shorts, it will be easier to pull it back out because then you have something to kind of find with your fingers over the fabric. Once you've worked the elastic all the way through, you will pull it out, and then we are going to sew that elastic together. Set your machine to a zigzag stitch and overlap the 2 end parts of the elastic. Stitch back and forth multiple times by holding that back stitch button, letting it go forward, holding the back stitch button again. I wanted to make sure mine was really nice and strong, so I double checked it, and then I went back in and did a second layer of stitches. This elastic is never going to come out. My elastic is in, it is not twisted. I am going to take it back to my machine. Putting my machine back to a straight stitch, I am going to close up that gap that we left open to insert the elastic. This part is optional, but do keep in mind that when you have an elastic band like this, sometimes it does like to twist around, especially in the washing machine. So what I like to do is just find kind of where my side seam would be, or the sides of the shorts, and I just use a straight stitch to sew down 1 row on each side. That way the elastic can't twist around when it goes through the washing machine or when the kids are playing or whatnot. We are almost done. Good job, people. You are doing so great. So it is finally time to hem up these shorts. I am just doing 2 tiny folds at the bottom. I did mention in the beginning, I do wish I would have made these shorts a little bit longer, especially because I do prefer the look of a deep hem. But this is where we are at now. So I am just folding them up twice, and I am using an iron this time, especially because it's such a small area of fabric. I do want it to stay up when I go to sew it down. And that was the final step. I am so happy with how these turned out. I think that they looked really great on my little toddler. This method again will work for pants. It will work for adult pants and shorts as well if this is a style that you wanted to go for. So I hope that you had a great time sewing this. I hope all of the instructions were clear. If there was anything that was not clear, please feel free to leave a comment. I would love to really help people to learn how to make their own clothes and find joy in the making. So please subscribe, leave a comment, send me a DM with a picture of what you made, and I hope that you had a great time learning how to make these shorts. Thank you so much for being here.